Hey guys, John here. Today we're going to make a preset called Temple of the Dead, and it sounds a little something like this, and hopefully you brought a fresh pair of underwear. Now, this kind of reminds me of maybe a monk in a huge temple that's kind of just doing his thing, singing whatever he's singing, and it could be nice for meditation, although I do kind of like the creepier stuff to meditate to. But anyway, that's just me. So a couple of things to keep in mind for this patch is there's a few interesting points of interest. So the first one is going to be that we have a lot of unison, and we're detuning this a little bit and having this full on in the mix. It's kind of one of the main things because we do want to have some content that we can work with. A little bit of noise in there to add some extra character. Now, the main way this sounds the way it does is because of this vowel filter here, and we're going to go over this as we recreate it. A little bit of EQ to kind of keep things in check, the compressor to keep the dynamic range not so drastically wild, some impulse reverb, which is going to be really cool, and then some delay, and last but not least, we have a little bit of modulation. We're using just one LFO to kind of keep things moving, and so it's just not so monotone. We didn't add any macros to this patch, although feel free to add some if you want to, maybe to increase the speed of the vocal or the reverb or really whatever it is that you want to add. Maybe there's some other special things or other sounds you want to add to this patch and you can put those on a macro. I don't know. Okay, so let's go to menu, initialize, and let's kind of start this recreation process. So we have our voices by default at 4. Let's scroll down to 7 and increase this all the way in the mix. So you have something kind of like that and give it some detuning. Next, we're going to add a razzle dazzle of some noise and maybe bring the profile down with right click a little down like this. And it shouldn't be overpowering. It should just kind of be there. And next up, if we're aiming for a vocal, if we're ever doing like an ah kind of thing, the attack is never going to be instantaneous like this. That's just weird. So we just increase our attack and maybe give it a little bit of a curve like that. And the release is never instant like that as well. So let's bring this up here. And I do like this little curve there, right? I like your curves. Now keep in mind with a patch like this with a long release and a big reverb, it will be a little bit more CPU intensive. So that's something to just keep in mind there. So we have our main content here. Okay, just something kind of big right there. Now, the main way we're going to be making this sound is if you right-click here under the modulation category, down here closer to the bottom, we have the vowel filters. So go ahead and select that. And what's nice about this is we have 5 different vowels that we can change out different types of vowels. But for this patch, I left these alone. So A, E, I, O, and U, exactly how it comes here. And basically, it's going to sound like this. Which is cool. However, we need to modulate this fader because this is going to fade in between the different vowels. Right now, we want to do this slowly, just kind of sound like it's organically moving. So with our fader, let's double click this, put this at halfway at 50%, and let's bring our LFO1, drag and drop it to this guy. And depending on how much width you want to go through all of these, it's really up to you how much depth you have. So let's give it, I guess, a healthy amount, something kind of like that, and see what that sounds like. So kind of ridiculous how fast it is, right? Yo, yeah, yo. I mean, I don't think anybody would sing like that. So that leads us to our next point. We have to slow this down drastically. Now, our rate's over here, but we don't want this synced to a tempo generally. So I'll take this off and I'll just slow this down to something like 0.02 or something. And one thing that you'll notice, especially looking at the spectrum view, it's starting this modulation at the same spot every single time. It resets to 50 every time we do that. And we don't necessarily want that. That's going to sound kind of weird. So that's because this is synced by the first MIDI note that we pressed is going to restart that waveform. So let's click this here and go to free. So it's kind of just, it's doing its own thing, man. It's living its own life. So we have something kind of like that. Now with this module, it's going to darken up our sounds quite substantially, which luckily enough for us, we have a brightness control. Now, how much of that brightness control that you want is totally up to you, but just keep in mind it is there. If it's a little bit too dark for you, you can make things a little brighter. So next up, we have this vocal kind of sound going on. It's kind of close, but we still need to sculpt and carve a little bit more so it's useful. Now, the next thing we probably want to add, if we right-click this here, is going to be an EQ, because there's some stuff we want to take out. Now, if this is a vocal, I would generally go to a high pass, and then maybe for the frequency cutoff, maybe 120. You can go a little bit higher, a little bit lower, depending on what sound you're going for, but 120s should be okay. And personally, there's always that low mids that I don't like that stuff. So we're going to remove that just a little bit, maybe widen out that Q. And up here, there's always kind of a pokey high end that's really unpleasant to the ear. Kind of maybe around there-ish or so. So I'll bring that down just a tad. Nothing too drastic. Maybe widen up the Q a bit as well. Okay, we have something kind of okay there. We can also go down here and go maybe to a high shelf, and then maybe bring this guy here and just give it a little bit of a bump like that if we want to, just get some of that brightness back as well. And the next thing we're going to be adding to this guy is going to be a compressor. Now, this should just be kind of keeping things a little bit in check, nothing too drastic, just keeping the dynamic range just okay. So 1 to 4, 4 to 1 is okay. That's fine. And a little bit of gain reduction. So you can have this there. Now, maybe this is moving too much through the modulation. So we can go to our mod matrix, and we're using this at 91. Maybe that's a lot. Maybe we can bring this down to like 69 or something like that. Okay, so we have these parts here. We got our vocal or our vowel filter, EQ, compression. Now, what's some other things that we can use to amplify this up? It's going to be reverb and delay. Now, luckily for us, since we're using Avenger, if we right-click at this here, we have an impulse reverb, which there's a lot of cool stuff in here. So if we click on this default preset, look at all this list of different types of impulses that we can add. Now, I don't know if you guys have gone through these, but there's a lot of cool ones. And the one I used for this is under the verbs large. We have Ancient Temple 1 and Ancient Temple 2, which is exactly what we're going for. So if we hit Ancient Temple number 1 and increase our mix here a little bit. So we have that, and we can adjust our pre-delay. Maybe we want something like 17. That might be interesting for a vocal. So we have that. Now, next thing we probably want to add is going to be some delay. So we can right-click this here, go to delay, and see what this sounds like. And maybe we can add some modulation to that, maybe fully, see what that sounds like with those delays as well. Pretty cool there. So maybe at the delay, we can give it some gain as well. So this is going to be how you create the main thing of this. Now, there's so many different things that we can keep adding on to this. This is usually, or just using one oscillator, one effect stack. We're not even touching the filter, which is kind of bizarre, right? Now we can do things, maybe adding like some more interesting effects. Like maybe we can go to a quantum effects and add some interesting things like with this guy. Maybe for this FX type, we can put, I don't know, maybe octave. That might be kind of interesting. Or we can go maybe to reverse. And maybe slow this guy down, maybe 1/4. That might be kind of cool there. And maybe, let's see, some drive could be interesting. Could be interesting. Maybe we can go to a phaser. drastically slower like that. Or, I mean, there's a lot of different things that we can go through for this as well. Maybe some bit depth. But yeah, that's just one of the ideas. We can remove that. And if you right click, there's so many different things that we can go through in this whole list that we can start adding and make this really, really, really cool. And maybe a vinylizer, what would that sound like? That's always a cool parameter, this age one, to put on a macro that you can kind of just add to or remove or things like that. Let's remove these noises for now, but that's always a cool one here. So that's one, and keep in mind there's so many other different effects that you can try to start adding things with. So highly recommend to experiment with those, but definitely a cool patch and making this kind of a monk temple, ancient, just mysterious kind of vibe to it. And before we go, keep in mind, like I said, for this vowel filter, we have the defaults, the A, E, I, O, and U, but there's also going to be different ones. So if you click this here, there's all these different ones you can change to kind of customize the vowels yourself, and then also shift these if you want a little bit of a different sound. So even that just sounds pretty cool right there. So yeah, try to make some of these patches and spend a lot of time with this vowel filter because there's so many different cool vocal sounds you can make with it. And you can really get some creative, realistic type of creepy vocals that you can put in all sorts of stuff. It's almost Halloween, so start making some creepy stuff about now. So yeah, thank you for watching. Hopefully you learned something, and we'll see you in the next video.